All right, perfect. Thank you everyone for joining. I think we'll get started now. There will be some more people joining as we go, but I think we're all good to get started. So to kick it off, let's start with a little bit about myself. So I'm Zane Franson. I'm the VP of Platform and Operations at Simply Ask AI. And my main role in our organization is leading our flagship AI automation platform. And so today I work with lots of organizations, both from private and public sector, to help them implement AI automation, and also to generally look at how it can enhance their existing business processes. So what we're going to talk about today, and what the title of our session was all around, which was really trying to decipher, through all the AI noise that we've heard over the years, to see how you can practically deploy AI automation within local governments. And so this is something that we've seen. We've also seen many use cases from private sector that are applicable to public sector. And so we'll talk about all of those here today. But first, a little bit about ourselves, if you're not aware or familiar with us. We're Simply Ask. We're founded in 2014, I guess over 10 years ago now, originally focusing on helping organizations implement IT consulting services, or IT projects, I should say, through our consulting services. So we're fully Canadian-based, headquartered in Vancouver. We also have a team out east in Toronto. And we still do those services today, but then we also offer Symphono, which is a no-code AI efficiency platform. And so, as I mentioned, we're working in a range of different sectors, from regulated ones like telecom, media, government, as well as others like construction, manufacturing, and so on. Okay, and just briefly about that product offering I mentioned, so Symphono, what it's all about is it's a no-code product suite that enables you to develop all different types of AI automation use cases. So there's pieces around AI agents, and those are really about a chat-based support for maybe constituents, external people, or internal employees, so they can quickly find information, submit requests, and so on. We have Flow, which is all around process automation, where you can map out a set of steps that you want to execute automatically and integrate with all of your different systems that you already have today, so acting kind of as the glue. And then we also have Serve, which is all around task management. And so combining them all together, you can build end-to-end automation solutions where maybe you have an AI capture requests. You can send them to Flow for processing. And then you can even have manual approval steps if you want. But anyways, let's focus in on the topic of today's conversation. So as I mentioned, what we are talking about today is really, cutting through the noise of all of these very aspirational AI solutions that have been put out there, and separate them from the practical ones that you could deploy very easily at your organization today and get quantifiable benefits out of it. Now, where I want to start is actually this diagram here. I'm sure some of you have probably seen this before, but if you haven't, this is the Gartner hype cycle, and it's really about how technologies are perceived by end users and customers, and how it kind of goes in cycles as the technology becomes hyped up with lots of expectations, and then it crashes down after proof of concepts and pilot projects don't live up to those expectations, and then eventually you settle in something where there's a reasonable level of expectation of the technology, and you're getting good productivity out of it. Now, I would say that when we're talking about generative AI and its use within public sector, and I'd say organizations just in general, we're kind of in the falling motion here. I feel like just based on the conversations that I have every day, it's been interesting to see how people's perception of this technology has changed over the years. And it hasn't been a lot of years, of course. I mean, 2 years ago, we were just kind of on the uptick where people were asking, okay, what can it do? We want to use it. There, any use case you have, let's go for it. then we're hitting kind of the peak where everything is AI. And now as people are realizing and seeing that um, some of the pilots and proof of concepts are doing with some of these solutions are failing, then we're getting into more of this falling motion here. And so, I believe there is still more to fall from the peak of expectations, but we are getting further down. And so, really, again, the purpose of this presentation is to look at, although we have this motion of inflated expectations going down to disillusionment, there is a set of good solutions that you could implement today, which are already, at a reasonable level of output, and we'll take a look at that. But before I go on, I guess just something to think about. I wasn't able to set up the polls here, but what I was going to ask was, how many of you have tried implementing AI solutions? And after that, how many of you actually found that they were successful in deriving quantifiable benefits to your organization? Now, the reason I ask that is that if you've been reading the headlines, especially over the past few months, you might have seen data like this. MIT report, they did a huge study on organizations across North America to see how successful they have been at implementing generative AI. And what they came out with was over 95% of AI pilots are failing. And even more critically, a greater amount than that are failing at mature and established organizations. Really, the companies that are benefiting from AI at this point have been more agile, and I guess we could say startups. But reading into it a bit more, as you start looking through the data and what the reporters and researchers are saying, they're actually saying that the core issue in the data that they collected was not the quality of the AI models, but how the models were being used by organizations. There's a couple pieces to that. So there's one piece where we're looking at that these models are not built around what your actual workflows are. A good example is that you can use ChatGPT as an individual to look up information or to generate content and so on, but adapting that to a organization's existing business processes is a little bit more challenging. So we're seeing that these generic AI tools are stalling in their enterprise use because they're not designed around what your workflows actually end up being today. On top of that, the reaction of many organizations when business teams are requesting AI tools has been initially, okay, well, we can build that ourselves. How hard can it be? And this is the insight that was mentioned in the report. They said something along the lines here of, almost everywhere we went, enterprises were trying to build their own tools, but the data showed purchase solutions delivered more reliable results. And I would say that in my experience as well, that I can confirm that I've had many conversations where people would say, I just want to build this myself. And I always tell them, best of luck, and we'll call you back in 6 months. And more often than not, when we reach out to them again in 6 months, there's not much progress made. And there's a range of factors behind this, but the most common really is that it's easy to build an AI prototype and get it working 75% of the time. But it's really hard to build a production-ready system that you actually want to put in front of people, especially external-facing people like constituents, that works 100% of the time. And again, we could get deeper into the reasons why for that. But overall, this approach of building custom generative AI tools, I see rarely works when we're looking at like a wide-scale use. I've seen good specialized tools built by organizations that do specific tasks, but building something more general and especially external facing has failed in a lot of organizations I've seen, both really big ones, the largest enterprises, as well as smaller ones as well. So taking a step back, I think what we've seen and we're talking about in the earlier slide and talking about this slide here is that many teams have been sold on the hype of generative AI and that'll replace all your work. But you and I are still here. And the key message is that with all of this said, there definitely still are practical use cases that do cut through this noise and that do get around these pitfalls that have been leading to all of these pilots failing at organizations. Okay, so let's talk about now the actual use cases that you could implement and are being successfully used by organizations. Um, Really, where I like to start at the top is always, don't look for nails with your AI hammer. And, I feel like that's the approach and really what led to the peak of expectations in that earlier chart I was showing, which is that people had this tool, they didn't know what to do with it. They're looking at anything that they could use it for, and they weren't really being tactical in terms of what it should actually be used for. And so, really, what we find in practice and in those percentage of projects that do succeed is that the best cases are always focused on improving your existing operational processes. So, we're not trying to reinvent them. We're not trying to create new ones that you need to learn to manage, because the number one reason for any digital transformation project fails, not just AI, is that um, change management fails as part of it. It's like over 50%, 60% of transformational projects. So the key point here is that, like any other new technology adoption, you're looking at how you can use it in incremental ways and in ways that are not reinventing how you're doing business today, but going to enhance how you're doing it. And you can look at more transformational changes later on, but gradually going through that cycle of adoption always proves to be more successful. And so when I think about different practical use cases, there's generally two categories that we can group them into. One is going to be around making operational processes more efficient. So that's what I just mentioned there. Maybe you have finance processes or communication processes or maybe auditing processes, looking at how you can embed generative AI within those flows to make them more efficient at certain stages where it makes sense. And the other piece is, of course, reducing IT project delivery effort and timelines. There's more than just using, AI for coding. We'll get into that. But the idea is that you kind of have these two operational and IT categories that we can group these use cases in, and we'll dive into each of these now. So let's talk about the operational use cases. Now, when we're looking at those, we're, as I mentioned, kind of looking at processes that you might be doing already today. So, of course, we're talking about public sector. So we'll narrow in on cases that are relevant for there. And one, of course, it comes off the top of my head always is the 311 support, providing support to constituents so they can find information more easily, provide multilingual support, and so on. Um, this is really an enhancement over the chatbots of years ago, where you could ask information, maybe go through an IVR to submit a request. But generative AI has greatly improved that support experience today. And so it's not as clunky as it was before and naturally is something that people would want to use. Council correspondence. This is another popular one where as you're getting in council correspondence and messages from constituents, having those automatically triaged and routed to the right person and department. So you don't have to necessarily have a clerk do that manually all day. Another popular one is looking at document processing and data entry. And so this might be for doing, quality audits, consistency audits. It might be also just for generally extracting text from documents as you receive them and loading them into whatever systems, reducing that manual data entry work. A variant of that is also invoice processing. We see quite popular within accounting teams, where you can embed AI to, first of all, route invoices based on different criteria. And for example, if you're using a single email inbox to receive invoices, everything account payable, you could set up AI to triage that inbox, route it to the right place, and um, then also use it to extract text from the invoices, load that into the financial system, and so on. And then another one which is interesting as well, and it's kind of similar to this external facing support agent, is making an internal facing support agent. We see this is quite popular in terms of centralizing things like bylaws or other information where you have these huge long documents in order to find, the exact quote or the bylaw within those documents can be a challenge, even for employees who are working with them quite often. And so putting that into one place where you can simply ask a question, get back an answer with a reference, um, is definitely a big time save for organizations. But I mean, what you might be noticing through these use cases I mentioned, and this, of course, is not an exhaustive list. What I would say is that these are the most common things that we see, but it's, of course, not an exhaustive list. But what you might be seeing through all of these is that they seem like more traditional automation with flavors of generative AI. And I would say that's an incorrect assessment. If we recall back to what we're saying, why AI projects fail, it's because they're not built around your existing processes. You're looking to transform or completely change your way of work. And we all know that we can't just change the way that we're working, especially for processes that have been done for many, many years. And so what we're looking at doing here in these use cases is just embedding AI as components within your existing workflows so that you can quickly deploy them and then get the ROI out of them as well without having the risk of huge change management. Again, I'm not saying there are no use cases where it makes sense to do change management and to modify your processes and so on. But as initial steps, we always advocate for doing initial projects that prove the value of the technology to apply it in a practical way for your organization, and then look at some of those broader, more transformational projects which may change fundamentally your business processes. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into all of these and see what these could actually look like. So let's start off with the council correspondence. As I mentioned, this is quite a popular solution. And the idea is that you might be getting council correspondence from a public web form that constituents fill out. You might be getting it from an email inbox that you have where people can send you messages. But the idea is, regardless of how it comes in, you could set up an automated workflow that would, at the start, analyze the contents of the message, also maybe look at the past messages that person has sent and other related requests which are open, and then determine which department and person to route that task to respond to, or to action if it's also an actionable task. At that point, you would create, a ticket or some sort of way to track that piece of work for whoever this task is assigned to in the end, notify them that it has been assigned to them, and then notify the original requester that, the team is working on it and they'll get back to you shortly, just to increase communication. Now, again, this is just a conceptual flow. You could, of course, add different steps, remove different steps, but really the key idea is using AI for doing this analysis of the rest requests that come in, and then using it in order to route it so that you don't need to, again, have a clerk, for example, manually routing different requests all day as they come in. And also, as a result, it increases response time and just a better experience for constituents in the end. And then afterwards, of course, once the request is received, then your team, would continue with their existing workflow. Maybe they're going to respond to it. Maybe they're going to add notes or statuses to the task and go from there. Now, there's another interesting piece here we often see for organizations who are interested in council correspondence, and that's the reporting aspect, where oftentimes we see that teams need to prepare weekly or monthly reports that show kind of the trends of what people are reporting, common topics, and so on. So the city has some insights into where the issue areas are at a given point in time. And so we often see that organizations see value from setting up AI as well to analyze the different requests that come in, the responses that go out, to generate reports on common topics, on topic trends over time, and so on. And so that's also a very practical and easy thing that you could set up if you have the tool to build an automated workflow like this. In a different direction here, looking at more a documentation auditing use case. This use case is different. The other one, as I mentioned before, that's kind of like an inbound request that you're receiving. It's maybe an email in the last example, or maybe someone filling in a web form. In this case here, what we're talking about is running a process that executes maybe every night or week or whatever frequency. And it checks all of your documentation for example, for consistency issues. We see this used in a wide range of different industries with different contexts, but the fundamental idea is that if you have a set of documents, let's say safety documents, safety procedures, and maybe you have, like 100 or 200 or 500 safety procedure documents, we see that organizations are able to um, set up a automated workflow that will take the contents of one document and compare it against all of the other documents. And that's using generative AI and vector data searching and so on. But at the end of the day, what that enables you to do is to do really the unhuman task of um, reading through every single other document, checking for consistency issues, checking for standards and policy issues, and generating a final report that's actionable where someone can see, okay, these exact snippets conflict, and we need to go ahead and make those changes. And so coming back to, for example, the safety context, we see that this is extremely relevant. The funny example that comes to mind uh, for me is that we were working with the construction company on a solution like this, and they had a bunch of safety documentation. And just to test it, randomly, we were putting in different documents when we're first setting it up. And the first one we tested was for blasting procedures, so when they're working with explosives. And when we ran it through the system, they actually identified that one of the documents says, after 10 minutes, if the explosive doesn't go off, you can return the site. Another document says, after 45 minutes, you can return to the site if the explosive doesn't go off. These are very substantial differences, especially in the context of safety, and that's just a one-off example that I was mentioning. But the idea is that the system can pick up on small nuances like that, and that's something that maybe even a human reviewer would miss. So it's a kind of a superpower that you can leverage with generative AI to do these wide-spanning documentation reviews and audits. And usable outside of safety as well. That was just an example that came to mind. Another interesting one is around for field workers. So this is now talking more about a internal facing AI chat solution. The term here, if you're not familiar with it, AI agents, we're really just talking about chat-based interfaces that employees or constituents could use and chat with. And so in our case here, we're talking about an internal use case, and this would be for people out in the field who are, doing their work. They're not in front of a laptop all day, but they have a cell phone in front of them. And so we see a lot of interesting application and benefits coming from use cases like this because, again, these employees are not working on their laptop all day, but they may need to escalate issues up to their managers or to a back office team to support them. And so the idea within this use case here is that you can set up a automated, chat-based experience where they're able to ask questions, find information out of procedure documents. So they don't need to look through, 20 PDFs to find exactly what they're looking for. They're able to submit requests, so maybe they do need to get approvals or something escalated to their manager, or maybe they need to go ahead and get someone from a back office team in the office to do something to support them, so you can submit requests that way too. And then you could also even transfer to human, and this is more so for larger organizations, but we do find that some teams have a live support for their field workers, internal live support for their field workers. And so you can even connect them from the AI system to the live immediately. But really, again, the key idea is just increasing access to information so people are spending less time looking for information and also spending less time submitting requests. Because again, if they have to go through various web forms to submit requests and they're out in the field, that's not really a good experience. And so if you can just have something native on their mobile device, like their iPad or their phone, then they could go ahead and just chat with it, submit the request as needed. And then the other piece is, of course, reducing the time for the back office tasks where maybe there are requests that people are submitting that can just be automatically resolved. We see this sometimes for teams which are doing more like maintenance and they maybe need to request some parts for a job instead of having to, send emails and then get different people going back and forward and approving it. You can actually just submit a request and then that request could be automatically approved. You probably want to put some criteria on that about value and whatnot, but you could fulfill those requests automatically as well. So that reduces, the back office support effort as well. Moving on to a different variant of AI agents. This is more external facing. So this would be, for 311 or for things like constituent support. The idea is that you would be able to have a constituent, chat with the AI agent, and they could ask it different questions. It might be bylaw questions, it might be just general amenities questions, and they can ask a question. It would then go and it could search knowledge bases. You could put whatever you want in these knowledge bases. Could be files, could be web sites, and so on, and it could provide answers over there. But more than just that, we could go ahead and see that um, it can submit fulfillment processes, the same idea as for the earlier internal use case for field workers. In our case here, maybe someone wants to submit a service request because there's a pothole in front of their house, for example. Now, really the key benefits out of this solution are access to information. Most commonly, we're seeing this type of solution used to improve access to, in particular, bylaw and permitting information, as there are a lot of documentation there, a lot of nuance, and sometimes it's harder to understand for people who are not, working with these documents all days. And so, this is even something that I've heard when we talk to different municipalities is that their biggest support gap is the ability for constituents to access and understand this information. And so the idea is that, by enabling a chat-based interface where someone can just ask a question in natural language, like, my neighbor's dog is barking too much, like, is this okay? And then they can get an answer back and it can have like a two-way dialogue about the bylaws itself. That obviously improves the constituent experience as well as offloads, hopefully, some of these more simple questions from your live support teams. The other thing as well is that we see, these systems, as I mentioned, being used to capture requests. And so that provides another way other than, someone on the phone reporting issues or sending emails. But also more interestingly is that if you're capturing requests in this way, you can use it to, for example, reduce duplicate requests. We see cases where maybe constituents are submitting the same request every single day over and over and over and over again. My neighbor's talking too loudly. And you would be able to set up the system where it could analyze the other tickets or requests that you've received in the past, connect them together so that you're not cluttering up your request management system with requests which are just duplicating themselves. Now, we've looked at a number of these conceptual solutions, and I have some more to talk about as we go on here. But what I'd like to do is just see what this looks like in practice. So if I jump over to something that I've just prepped here quickly before our session here today. What I've set up is I've set up just an AI support agent. This, could be on a city's website, but the idea is that it's something that constituents can use to look up any information in the city. It could be bylaws, it could be general recommendations, it could be anything. And so our case here, if we ask it something like, what pools does the city have? Right now, this is set up for City of Vancouver. And so it will understand that, we're talking about the City of Vancouver and it'll find relevant information from there. And what it's doing is searching for information. Now, it's searching for information that is stored in a knowledge base. And That's very important because you don't really want the AI using whatever information it finds online or it has in its model, because it may have incorrect information, out of date information, and the last thing you want is for um, wrong information being provided on behalf of the city. So basing it on your own information makes it so that it's just as reliable as someone reading a web page and opening that up. And so we can see here that we get a nice response. And so we get a list of the public swimming pools, and it gives us a nice summary of all of the different ones. If we wanted more information, we could ask follow-up questions like, what is the address of this pool, and go from there. But we can also just switch context and look at a different domain that it's often used in, and we can say something like, how does the noise bylaw apply to construction? And so once again here, we're going to see that it's going to be searching for information. And we go back to what's happening in our diagram is that previously it was finding answers from the city's website. Now what it's going to be looking for is from information in uploaded documents. And there's no limit. We've seen organizations upload thousands and thousands and thousands of documents to make them searchable. But what it's going to do here is it's going to search the bylaw documents that we've given it, and then use that to generate a response. And so if we go back here, we can see that, certainly here are the bylaws and rules according to bylaw number 6555, which is the noise control bylaw for City of Vancouver. And it just understood that because, we told it generally we're talking about the noise bylaw related to construction. And so within here, we get a nice summary of it. And then we also even get it recommending that if you have more questions, you can contact the city from, these different time periods. So question and answer, great use case, especially when we're talking about making bylaws and policy information more available, especially when it can be confusing to regular readers. Other things you can do with it as well, though, is we can go ahead and submit requests. And so we could say something like, there's a pothole in front of my house. I need to get it fixed. Say something like this, where there's a pothole in front of my house. I want to get fixed, and so these systems are also able to capture requests so that they can be submitted, prioritized, and later fulfilled. And so in our case here, it's going to ask us for the address, which makes sense, and we could say something like Main Street, 123 Main Street, Vancouver. We could say name. And then it's going to just confirm with us our name, our address, and the pothole description. And we can just say yes, submit that. And then what it's going to do behind the scenes now is it's going to create a task. It's going to assign it to the right person, make sure it's not a duplicate, and eventually it's going to return back with a ticket ID. So those are just some ideas to show how flexible and I guess natural these systems are to work with. Again, chatbots I don't think are a new thing. They're definitely not a new thing for municipalities, but using generative AI in such a way that makes this information more searchable in natural language is something that the traditional NLP-based chatbots were not able to do. But what we can do today here is just very naturally ask it questions, switch between topics, get relevant information, get references, and when needed, get referrals to speak to the live support, and of course submit requests too. Okay, so that was more on the operational side. Let's talk about accelerating IT projects with AI. Now, of course, there's always a constant pressure of doing more with less. Feels like that's a stronger pressure these days, especially being felt by the IT teams that I talk with. And what we'll talk about here are not necessarily generic applications of AI. There are great tools out there like GitHub Copilot, for example, that enables software developers to program faster and to deliver projects faster. But what we're looking at is more so about specialized tools for doing things like AI code modernization conversion, where you're looking to convert entire legacy code bases to modern technologies. Or for example, doing data migration, where you need to generate mappings between a legacy database to a more modern one that you're moving to. Or doing software testing, where you want to generate suites of software test cases for whatever software you are testing. So there are general tools, as I mentioned, like GitHub Copilot, that help with software development. However, asking them to do a complete code-based conversion in one prompt probably isn't going to work out successfully, which is why specialized tools for these different areas become valuable. So if we continue on and we go into one of these more deeply, let's talk about the AI code modernization conversion. So the tool that we have here, and we've tested all of this ourselves, all the use cases I've talked about today are things that we've developed and seen in practice. This use case in particular, we're looking at migrating like entire both database procedures and structures, as well as code, legacy code like JSPs and so on, into more modern versions. I have a little bit of a typo here, but you might want to convert maybe a JSP into like a React and Node.js application, for example, so it's more maintainable, fixes security vulnerabilities, things like that. Those are often the key triggers we see for doing these upgrades. And so we've done this, as I mentioned in the past, and what we find is that if with the right tools, you are able to convert like 80% of a code base, large code bases, automatically. And then only the remaining 20% requires some effort to go ahead and do. And so really to get there, to go a little bit deeper into how it works, the idea is that the system kind of iteratively works through the code base. It does multiple generations. It does kind of like a first draft, a second draft, a third draft, until it refines it to the point where you have a running application in the end. Now, it sounds simple. Unfortunately, it's not just as easy as throwing like an AI prompt in, telling it to do something and then putting it in a loop. But there is some effort around, getting the right prompts, handling errors, things like that. But anyways, after doing, all of that R&D and so on, you end up with a tool like the one that we've developed here for doing this type of code modernization conversion, and comes in quite handy, especially with organizations that have a ton of legacy code that has vulnerabilities in it that they have to upgrade at some point in the near future. Okay, so we've talked about use cases. We've talked about some of the pitfalls about how you go about implementing AI, how you manage, all the change management aspects around it as well, and to minimize the impact to daily operations while still maximizing the return that you're getting on your investment. Let's talk about how you can actually go ahead and practically implement these today. So as I mentioned, we started out in IT consulting over a decade ago. And over the years, we've used, I'd say, most of the automation and AI tools that have come out there. And we've also worked, obviously, with many clients who end up using these tools too. And we've seen also through their experience of what has gone wrong and what has gone well. And the number one way that we see to minimize this technology adoption risk is to look for tools that are easy to iterate with. They're low upfront cost to develop with, and just generally enable not just your technical teams to work with them, but also your business analysts and your business teams. And really, what we see in terms of the best type of tool to fulfill all of those checkboxes are what we like to call no-code first tools. They're not no-code tools. I'd say there are limitations of fully no-code tools because at that point, you may hit a block where you can't, do some calculation you need to do for automation. But they're also not low-code where, if you have experience with low-code tools, they're pretty much just full-code tools with a new name. So we're looking at tools that you could pretty much implement everything you need to do fully no-code, but when needed, you have the adaptability to do something more complex when needed. And so really the key benefits here is that if you can describe things in these tools And we'll look at some practical examples of what I mean by all of this as well. But if you can describe things in these tools, then you can build them. You can map things out on paper, you can implement them within there. And so that's great because both your vision and your business team's vision for AI automation can be quickly realized in your current operational processes. So if we're looking at these types of tools, I'm thinking about things that are drag and drop. You can build out workflows, dragging and dropping all the different steps. You can describe, the structure of AI agents just in English. This is what I'm really meaning when I'm talking about these no-code first tools. And so the benefits of this is that, as I was mentioning before, it makes it easy to integrate within your existing workflows. You're not doing a lot of upfront investment to play around with them. You can just simply start developing things. You're empowering not just your IT team members, but also your business team members to use them so that they can build out their own solutions. So, hopefully you can drive more innovation within your organization. You can also try out ideas quickly. So you're not doing long investments to find out in the end that, maybe the technology is good, but for this use case, it's not going to work. Then you can test them out quickly. And also, you're focusing more on the business outcomes you're trying to drive rather than the technical details for all that. And so one solution for that, of course, is our offering of Symphono. The idea really is, though, that we're looking at not just no code first, but centralized platforms where, with one solution, you can build end-to-end automation. And so there's other tools out there, they're more siloed custom tools. We have, Microsoft, of course, they have their Copilot module, they have their Power Automate modules. But the problem with those is that, for example, integrating outside of their ecosystem becomes a challenge. And then you need to integrate other tools, and there's more licenses, more complexity. And it's really not just a simple tool that you need to play around with these use cases. Because again, as you're first introducing generative AI, one piece is the change management, and the other piece is, of course, getting investment and budget to play around with it. So you want to find something that's efficient for all of those areas. The other thing as well is that, a lot of these tools that are out there for building AI solutions are often either low code or full code. And so again, that increases development cost and time and doesn't allow you just to focus on those business outcomes you're trying to drive. So let's just take a few minutes here to look at what this actually means in practice. And we can actually look at what we did here in Symphono. Now, again, this is really just to show you the, art of the possible of what you can use in order to build out these types of automation solutions. But really what I want the takeaway to be from this presentation for you is just that there are use cases out there that are practical. They can be deployed into your operations, and that there are tools like Symphono and others that can help you achieve those goals. So taking a look at how we actually built out this whole flow of conversation, and this is something that I built in about 10 minutes or 15 minutes before our presentation here. But the idea is that you can set up AI agents, so the whole conversation experience we're having here, in such a way where you're just defining in English. And so this is something that your IT team could use. It's something that your business team could use, but you're just defining what do you want the framework of support conversations to be. And so you're just instructing the AI, how should it greet the person? What are the different things it should be able to do, objectives? In our case here, in our demo, we had answering questions. So we just had an objective to answer questions. We also had it collecting service requests. So we had a submit service request. And then you can connect it up, to knowledge bases, and you can connect it up to workflows to do fulfillment. Or you can integrate it with other systems. And so those could just be, different actions. In our case here, we have, a search knowledge base action, but we could also, invoke an API if we wanted instead. And the other things as well, generally, we recommend tools that are going to allow you to select whatever AI models you want. That's especially important for some jurisdictions in Canada where you have to keep all of your data within the province or within the country. And so you can actually select the AI models that do that for you. A lot of platforms you don't even know what they're using under the hood, so this gives you that control. And then other things we always recommend looking at are tools where you can just enable multilingual support. You can simply collect feedback. Other things that allow you to enrich the support experience and to speak to your constituents in the most natural way for them. The last thing I'll touch on as well, this was more about the conversation side, is the fulfillment side. And so there are solutions, again, like Symfona here, where you can build out automated workflows that will go ahead and execute a bunch of steps. In our case here, this was actually the workflow that executed when we finished submitting our process and returned us back a ticket ID. And in that case here, we've just drag and dropped, built out a workflow that creates a service ticket. But we could do even more here where, for example, as I was talking about, using AI to triage tickets, to reduce duplicates, to make sure they're assigned to the right person. You can add AI within your workflows. In our case here, we could tell it that you are a service ticket categorizer. And then afterwards, you could go ahead and add a branch and route it to the right person accordingly out of there. So yeah, I'm not going to spend any more time on here, but again, really the key message that I want to drive home out of all of this is that there are use cases out there and there are tools out there as well that can make the barrier to entry very low, especially for these practical use cases that aren't reinventing how you're doing business today, but really just adding value, making things more efficient, reducing your operational costs so that you can invest in improving service in other areas as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for spending your time with me this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. I hope you got something out of this and something that you could bring back to your organization for these practical use cases. If you have any questions, I think we do have a little bit of time and I can stick around. Otherwise, I'd also be happy to chat and you can scan that QR code over there. Yeah, thank you again, everyone. Okay, yeah, we have some questions here. Let me take a look. So we had a question, does all of your AI backbone models guarantee residency in Canada? Yes, yep. So that was really the benefit of being able to select an AI model, and that's a really important consideration because a lot of tools out there that organizations are playing around with or just testing out, they either don't realize that data is being sent outside of Canada when you're using a lot of these large language models. Um, and having the ability, first of all, to know where your data is going, but also to select and choose where it's going is critical, to be compliant with FOIPA and other data regulations. So yeah, definitely possible in the solution we built, and definitely something that we advocate for in terms of helping municipalities select what tool sets that they should be using. Yeah, which models are guaranteed in Canada? I would have to double check that exact list. There's actually a couple options though. So for example, we do have some of the open source models running on data centers in Canada. And so that would be like the latest OpenAI open source model they've released. It also includes other things like the Meta Llama models. So those can be all used on data centers, which are in Canada, so data doesn't leave. And then there's also some other ones like I believe through the Azure service, we're able to access other OpenAI models. But you have a wide range, pretty much anything open source can be run. And a lot of these open source models are leading the way in some areas or keeping up in other areas, but they're all proficient and able to do all of the use cases I just mentioned today. Yeah. So for open source models, there's a couple things like when we're talking about open source models. I normally don't recommend organizations host their own open source, their own open source models for um, just like a couple use cases because running them can be costly. However, if you're using, like a service like Symfona or other platforms, then you can access, a shared, I guess, compute of those models. So, but yeah, mostly open source ones hosted within Canada. There are a couple which non-open source, like some of the OpenAI models, are hosted in Canada, but most of the ones I would recommend using today are open source for what we have access to in Canada. No, for sure. Great question. Okay. Let's see here. Any other questions? Yeah, any other questions before we wrap up? Great. Well, once again, thank you everyone for attending. If you want to chat further, my email is right up there on screen. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can just chat and you can scan that link there. So thank you everyone for your time this afternoon.